Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast with myself, Scotty Mr. Slipper, the South Auckland Doosra, delivering it from not a no ball, the opposite, where you deliver it from back around the umpire, just as a Doosra before the delivery even hits the deck and gets the spin off the pitch and you don't know which way it's spinning. That's the Niche Case, and I'm here with the Wobbly Wildcard to chat through some Kiwi sports business. On the menu today, we got Wellington Phoenix. They had another good win last night, Wednesday night, so they are 2 wins out of 3 games this week. So we'll be doing plenty of Wellington Phoenix in the back end of the podcast. We got Blackcaps preparing to take on England. That is coming up next week. It's coming around real fast, so we'll chat about that as well. And we've got some rugby league to start us off here with the Warriors playing the Cowboys, and we've also got our 5th Kiwi NRL debut of the season. Early in the week we record the variety show. There's a Patreon podcast as well, talking all about playmaking and the wizardry, the art of playmaking pretty much, so check that out. If you are a patron, and if you're not a patron, that is the best way to support us. Emails coming out Monday and Friday. There's another one tomorrow, so there'll be more Kiwi sporting goodness in that email. And we're always writing about Kiwi sports at the niche-case.com. Wobbly Wildcard. We'll go back to the compost bin of mindfulness today. What do you got in store for us?
The good old compost bin. I have one in store here that is very much in light of having just watched the football team that I support lose a European final on penalty shootouts, despite not missing any of their first 10 penalties, but then that's the problem when the other team scores their first 11. So it goes. So in light of the old, I think what is an age-old, a universal sports fan, I won't say problem because it's very much a part of the experience, but yeah, a universal aspect of the sports fan experience, coping with defeat. In light of that, I offer up a quote from the Buddha himself: accept what is, let go of what was, and have faith in what will be.
And how's that helping you deal with the sporting grief?
All about next season, mate. All about next season now.
So you're telling me like the age-old Warriors adage, the trope of all Warriors business is, next season, bro. So that is a very Buddhist approach, whereas people mock it, but it's like, actually it's the ultimate form of Buddhistry.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you didn't think that, you wouldn't come back, would you? You'd just like, if you stop and look at the patterns, but then that's the thing, is it doesn't matter how many times you've been knocked down, you always gotta, like, I don't know if it's like an illogical part about being a sports fan, or if it's maybe the most logical part about being a sports fan, that like, no matter how many times you get knocked down, you can always get back up again. So, like, one year eventually it will be the Warriors' year, one year. I don't know when that will be. I don't even know, like, to what degree it will be their year, but eventually that will be the case. So, like, you just, I guess that's the, I don't know, I think you sort of have to be an eternal optimist to be, like, to put it in the corniest way possible, but to give your heart to a sports team like that, like, you sort of have to be an eternal optimist, don't you? Like, you have to believe that it is going to get better and you're going to win stuff. Because most times, like, how many teams are in the NRL, for example? 16. One team is going to win that championship. One team out of 16, and it's normally one of the same few teams that often win it. Like, at least those are the same teams that you expect to be competing. Like, most teams, your season ends in disappointment. Sometimes the disappointment comes right at the very end. Sometimes it comes a lot earlier and the writing's been on the wall for ages. But, like, disappointment over success, like, that ratio as a sports fan is pretty heavy towards the disappointment side. But it's those little fleeting moments of success that I guess keep you coming back. And it's not always the success itself, but, like, the dream of that future success. Like, I guess to go back to the quote, like, having faith in that future success.
What's your level of faith in future success for the Warriors this season? Like, where do you just think they're at? Like, what is your... do you have them as a fringe top 8 team? That's where they're going to be battling. They're going to be battling to make the finals come season end.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's the NRL table's relatively clear at the moment. I think like there's 4, maybe 5 teams, depending on how the Rabbitohs track when they get a couple guys back from injury. One fella in particular who plays fullback, but like it seems pretty clear who the main contenders are, and there's 1 or 2 teams pretty upwardly mobile right now. Manly feels to be one of those teams. The Warriors, fringe top 8. Might make it, I would say still at the moment, probably more likely than not to miss out, to finish sort of 9th or 10th range. But in a different way than they have done in the past, because it does feel like they're building towards something at the moment. Like a couple young players, and especially like having Reece Walsh, Harris Tavita having very good seasons, that kind of thing is always promise. I mean, that's where the faith in what will be comes from, I suppose.
And it's a pretty interesting game this week because the Cowboys have been on a bit of a roll. We're seeing the Todd Payton juice come into effect with the Cowboys. Just like it kind of started with their the last time they played the Warriors, and they fought the Warriors pretty competitively, and they are 3-2 in their last 5 games, and the Warriors are 2-3. So Cowboys have had more wins in their last 5 games than the Warriors, and they're on the rise. They're right behind the Warriors on the ladder, and both teams have a bit going for them. The Cowboys on the rise, the Warriors are fresh into this Reece Walsh era. They've got a bit more attacking spark. Remember that moving to wing for Roger Tuivasa-Sheck amounted to his fewest touches in a game this season, as well as the most run meters in a game, and the only game this season in which he's had each of a try assist, and a line break. So I said that in the variety show, and now it's time to say, what's game 2 of Roger Tuivasa-Sheck on the wing look like? I think it's going to be pretty similar, and I think Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is going to be one of the best wingers in the NRL. He just doesn't have to do anything he's not good at, and what he's not good at, Reece Walsh is really good at. So Tuivasa-Sheck's the best ball runner, one of the best ball runners in the NRL, best footwork, either code. Definitively, I think, is Roger Tuivasa-Sheck in New Zealand. Best footwork nation in the world as well, definitively. And you just want Roger Tuivasa-Sheck popping up everywhere, where he doesn't have to worry about passing the ball. He's just like, okay, I got the ball here, I'm going to run. That's what I want Tuivasa-Sheck, especially when he's getting the ball kind of out on the wing, and the defense is kind of, what do you got to envision here? Maybe an umbrella wrapping around Tuivasa-Sheck, who's on one side of him, he's got the touchline, so he can't go that way. And then he's got this umbrella shape coming at him from the other side. That's great for Tuivasa-Sheck, because he can step all through that. But if you're presenting a straight defensive line, that's better. It's a better defensive ploy, and I think we saw a lot of that when he was playing fullback. He would always beat the first tackler. He'd always make him miss, and that dude was the dude who popped out of the defensive line and tried to tackle him. Whereas I think if you just sit there on a straight line with Tuivasa-Sheck, you can contain him. But if you got dudes scattered everywhere, which usually on the wing, or if he is popping infield for an extra carry, which, like, he had the similar amount of runs, so there's no extra or fewer carries with what Tuivasa-Sheck is doing between fullback and wing, but I think there's just more chances where he's getting the ball with a scattered defensive line, and that is perfect for him and the Warriors.
Yeah, well, you called a lot of this last week on the podcast about what Tuivasa-Sheck could do on the wing, and then we had a relatively clear indication in that game. Who were they playing? The Tigers, wasn't it? Had a relatively clear indication there of exactly how effective he could be, and then of course that also brings Reece Walsh into the starting lineup, and it's a funky one, because you sort of, it feels like a little bit of a, because there's absolutely no doubt that Tuivasa-Sheck is the best fullback that the club has, one of the best fullbacks in the entire competition. And it sort of feels like a transitional thing because he is leaving, but then also you look at how effective this move could be from a tactical point of view. It's, I don't know, it's pretty tasty. And I think there's because you asked me at the start how I feel about the Warriors' expectations, and things like this is one of the, like that game last week and some of the stuff we saw there is one of the major reasons why I still think there could be like a twist or two in the tail. And we have seen the Wellington Phoenix, who we'll talk about later on, have the second half of the season where, more or less coinciding with when Stephen Taylor got back, where they've just, like, I think they're 9 games unbeaten at the moment and starting to string a couple wins together, and their form at the start wasn't great, but they're finishing very strong and giving themselves every opportunity to make the playoffs in the season where, like, they're going to have 2 home games through the entire season. A team that is traditionally, I won't say reliant on home form, but I will say, like, I won't say dependent on home form, but a little bit reliant on home form. We'll put it that way. They're still in the mix with 2 games to go, which is pretty crazy. And one of those 2 games is the second of those 2 home games. So they've only played 1 up to this point, and that was last week. Like, there's definitely a snowball effect with the way this Phoenix season is going. Still think there's some hints with the Warriors that there could be some of that. I'm not going to go all in on that because could just as easily be a bounce back, sort of reversion to the mean kind of game. And even then, they only beat the Tigers by 4 points. The Tigers aren't exactly like championship contenders right now, so frisky stuff, but it is also a particularly curious time to be watching the Warriors do their thing right now, it seems.
Yeah, and one more thing is that the Warriors re-signed or extended Taniela Otukulo, who is named on the extended bench this season. He is a hooker from Otahu Leopards Jr. And he was playing SG ball at the start of last year. So he was playing under 18s at the start of last year, and he has been on the extended bench kind of every game for the last 6 weeks or so. Obviously, he's the next specialist hooker because Wade Egan's starting. Jazz Tavanga can do a job mid-game if he needs to, and then Otukulo's there, I imagine, because they need to have an extra hooker in their game day squad, just in case. He will make his debut, I suspect, sometime this year. And the Warriors have, prior to re-signing him, they let Carl Lawton go mid-season. So the way things have played out at hooker, you can see, like, I think the same applies for Wade Egan. Like, you can see that whatever Wade Egan was doing to start his Warriors stint, people within the Warriors thought that Wade Egan was good enough to be their number 1 hooker. And that has transitioned into Wade Egan playing 80 minutes most games this season at hooker. And then you can also apply that logic of just reading the situation, reading what the Warriors might be thinking, and the Warriors release Carl Lawton, which was pretty strange. Like, he's your second hooker, and you don't have many hookers, and you just let him go to the Manly Seagulls for nothing, really. Like, just whatever. No fuss, because it's not a transfer market, but just no fuss. I read that as the Warriors quite like Taniela Otukulo. So keep an eye on him. He might, make a last-minute appearance in any of the next few weeks, but I think he's a powerful ball runner, and I think that if you combine him with Wade Egan, might be an even funkier Warriors team in the future. We also, wildcard, we'll just touch on, Brisbane Broncos have named a dude by the name of TC Robati, who is a Porirua Vikings Jr. in Wellington. And he is named on the bench for tonight's game, the Thursday night game. So you'll be listening to this on Friday. So he would have played last night for the Brisbane Broncos if everything goes to plan. So here's the 5th Kiwi NRL debutant this year. You've got Widemu Greg from Northland, Edward Kosi from Auckland, Rocco Berry from Wellington. Simi Sasangi made his debut for the Knights last week. He is from Auckland. And now you've got TC Robati from Wellington coming off the bench for the Broncos. And I'll suggest that the Broncos have the most underrated Kiwi NRL recruitment, because all you're hearing about is them letting players go and how shit they are at keeping their players. They've got TC Robati. They've got Jordan Ricky, who they recruited from Christchurch. They recruited and gave a scholarship to TC Robati to go to school in Australia from Wellington. They have Xavier Willison from Hamilton. He is a massive mobile middle forward. He went to Palm Beach Currumbin through the Broncos, I believe. He might make his debut this year, later in the season, maybe. Definitely next season. Playing reserve grade. And they also have a dude by the name of Dane Mariner, Maris Saints Jr. in Auckland. He is also at Palm Beach Currumbin, and he's a centre. And his Tweed Heads under-18 team won the Queensland under-18 competition. So they've just got a selection of guys who all forecast forward as NRL caliber talents. Doing my fucking NBA scout stuff there.
Yeah. You're Draft Express or whatever. You're gonna need to put star ratings on everyone though. I have one question about the NRL right now, which is probably quite a specific one to this podcast, but is there a reason other than just random coincidence why the Dragons and Warriors always seem to play on the same day? Because they're both back to back on Friday night this week. So Warriors away to North Queensland, Dragons away to West Tigers. They played each other in round 6. This wasn't the case before round 6. I think it only happened once in the first 5 rounds. Played each other in round 6. Since then, this will be the 6th week in a row when they've both played back to back. Normally, for obvious time zone reasons, the Dragons playing the latter game, the Warriors playing earlier because of the Kiwi time frames and whatnot. With the exception of Anzac Day, where the Warriors Storm game was the second one, but that was a special occasion. It might just be coincidence, but it just seems like this keeps happening. It's a bit weird.
You're probably the only one who cares.
That's what I mean about it being very specific, yeah. But
I just don't think there's many Dragons faithful who are also interested in the Warriors. So maybe it's just a massive disrespect. It's just a fuck you to the Dragons, and that's all it is, from the NRL. Or just from the NRL community.
Well, they deserve it if that's the case.
You watch Hello Sports in Australia, they do a bunch of podcasts, and they refer to it as the dirty merger clubs. And this week is the dirty merger derby between the Dragons and West Tigers, and right. I am fully in agreement with that. Nothing good has come from merging clubs, it just seems like the dumbest shit. That was probably really smart back in the 80s or 90s, but now it's just everything in sport goes to the top. So it's the example set by the leaders in those organizations. And if we're thinking Brooklyn Nets NBA, Sean Marks is close to the top, but he isn't the top man in the Brooklyn Nets organization. But then, even then, he sets the example for everyone below him in how the organization operates. Dirty merger clubs are just half their boardroom is against each other. You've just got that faction and that faction. They're bitter and twisted against each other because they're all old dudes who came up from the old times, and it's just little power play, Game of Thrones-y shit within the clubs. Obviously that applies to all clubs, and that can happen at all clubs, but having merged clubs seems like the ideal recipe for that situation of discontent.
Interesting to see how that unfolds over the next few years in local Kiwi football then, because that is something that's been a big trend over the last couple of years for relatively simple reasons. It's either to do with, it's both, but finances are one thing, just there's a lot of clubs, and if there are fewer clubs, it's a little easier to balance those things. And the other one is just ambitions, where, the National League is now accessible to clubs, and if you want to get to that point, which you now can, you've got to be finishing very high in your local conference region, so you've got to be very good to do that. And if you look at the Northern League table at the moment, there's at least 3, I think 4 merger clubs that have been recent things. Let me whip it up there, but you've got Northern League table. Auckland United is a merger club, and then everyone else is down the bottom. Northern Rovers, West Coast Rangers. So I think that's it from those, but it's a couple elsewhere around the country. 2 of the biggest clubs in Dunedin merged, and it's this Auckland City, I suppose you could say as well. Sort of, they've always been sort of sister clubs with Central United, but now they've just taken over their Northern League team spots, so that's kind of the same thing there as well. And there's, like I say, obvious sort of ambitions and reasonings and whatnot for why this is the case, but I can see down the line over the next few years, especially for teams that don't make it, if you're Northern Rovers and you combine a couple of relatively big clubs and then get relegated, you're not going to, it's the first sign of when cracks would start emerging. So I'm not saying that will happen. I'm just saying that in using this example as, an example, because that's what examples are, there are definitely a few case studies we could be following in the football over the next few years.
Yeah, the football landscape has definitely become the dirty merger club landscape recent times. So yeah, definitely interesting. If anyone out there listening is part of a, with all respect due, a dirty merger club, and you've got adequate thoughts, or maybe you want to buck the trend and say, nah, we merged and everything's all good. So make it known. Let us know. Hit us up. What is interesting you, Wildcard, about the Blackcaps test series coming up against England? I wrote about Ross Taylor and how his summer in New Zealand wasn't necessarily fantastic. Maybe that should have been my answer when you asked me on the variety show, what are you hoping to see? Ross Taylor runs will be the big one. Not such a great record over the summer. Pretty good record overall in England. And he's one of the most experienced players, New Zealand players who have played in England. He is one of the most experienced players in English conditions as well. So that's one thing. How are you feeling about it? Are you excited? You did tweet the old eyeballs with the Devon Conway opening. That's kind of your biggest thing, I'd say, heading into this test series, is you're hanging your hat on Devon Conway opening, which is fair and reasonable. Do you want to elaborate on any of those things? Or you got something slightly different that you've been pondering as well?
I mean, I think the Conway thing has almost been confirmed with the because the Blackcaps put out the 11s of this inter or intra squad. I can't remember. Inter squad, I think. I guess it's a warm-up game. This is what happens when you're in COVID times and you can't play warm-up games necessarily against other teams. You just play amongst yourselves. You got a 20-man touring squad, sweet as 20-man touring squad minus Trent Bolt, who's coming over later, which means they've called up 3 just local fellas to come and make up the numbers. And you've got it's not just that Conway's opening, it's that he's opening with Latham and that Blundell isn't opening. So those 3 clues together, I think, more or less confirm what I think we already sort of knew was going to happen, which is you want Devon Conway in the first 11, you're going to sneak him in as an opener because that's just the most obvious spot. Although the middle orders are mostly batting in the other team. They've mixed it up quite nicely. Actually looking at these, wondering which team would actually win. I think I'm leaning towards the Latham 11 over the Williamson 11, but maybe we'll find out. Maybe they'll actually tell us. I don't know if we'll be so lucky as to get a scorecard, but see how it goes. Yeah, the Conway opening thing is, it's the main thing, but also it just doesn't feel like a surprise. It doesn't feel like something to look for. So I don't know if it's quite the answer to that question. Maybe, I don't know, because England have got quite a few injuries as well. So I think it's definitely a test that's there for the winning, and I suspect we'll see pretty close to the best available team, obviously minus Trent Bolt, who won't be ready in time for the Lord's Test. My theory is that you'll probably see a couple guys rested for the second test, just to make sure everyone's fresh for the final. Like Ross Taylor, for example, has had a couple muscle injuries in the last few months, and he probably wants the timeout in the middle. That would be nice if he could score 100 at Lords. It would certainly put that particular worry to bed, but also playing 3 games almost in like 3 weeks, because it's back-to-back-to-back test matches. It might as well be a 3-game series. It's 2 games against England, then like I think it's the same distance, the same gap between the first and second test against England as it is between the second test against England and the championship final. So like that's effectively a 3-test series, which means that when you're prioritizing that third test, I think that might be something to look out for. In which case, because you are going to have a frontline seamer missing for the first game, and potentially maybe rest someone like a Wagner who might otherwise work up a heavy workload. Someone like Ross Taylor, is 1 or 2 others you might think to rotate out. We might actually get decent and also there's no Test Championship points on the line here, because we've got this weird situation where within the time frame of the Test Championship competition, this will be our second series, so our 4th test, both 2-test series against England, 2 tests at home, 2 tests over there, within the Test Championship period, which haven't counted towards Test Championship points, which is strange. It's just weird how that one's worked out. But yeah, there might be a sneaky little opportunity then if you're looking at things like that. If there might be just a little bit of rotation for Edgbaston, I think it is. Might get to see Will Young playing a test in England following on from his strong form. Might get to see possibility Ravindra or Duffy could get debuts. You might get a little 1 game for de Gronholm, 1 game for Mitchell, maybe like you just want Santner to get his reps in. I don't know, but we could see a little bit of rotation. We could see a few other players from outside what's normally a very, very solid first 11. So I think that's quite exciting, is to see in foreign conditions, which is obviously a test in itself, because that is like where the great test teams are measured, is winning away from home as well as at home. And it's against an England team that is nowhere near full strength. That like Ben Stokes is out injured, Jofra Archer is out injured. I don't know that one actually matters that much. He's never really done a whole lot against us other than bowling a half-decent super over that one time. There's, I think it's Folks was ruled out this week, and there's a couple guys like the Bairstow and Butler definitely. I think Moeen might be another one, who all rotated out, like just with the constant England rotation system that they do. They seem to have the Blackcaps' idea of managing player welfare is to just not play that many games. Games are expensive to host, etc. England tends to make profit on test matches, so they probably only if any teams do, then it's England, India, and Australia, and even then it's probably a little sketchy depending on who they're playing against. But England's idea is just play as many test matches as possible, but we'll rotate guys, so they don't always have the same team. Very few players play every test match for them. And that might just leave them a little bit vulnerable. So there's an opportunity where the Blackcaps can do some rotation and also still be very, very competitive away from home against a normally very decent team. So all of that is exciting in and of itself. I don't know if there's one major factor, but the overall package, the overall bundle is pretty. I'm just missing cricket, so I'm looking forward to it in general.
Who is more likely to make their debut, Rachin Ravindra or Jacob Duffy?
I think Duffy's a decent chance to play the first game when we know for sure that Trent Bolt won't be there. I mean, hierarchy suggests that Matt Henry plays. Matt Henry's played at Lords before, actually. His first test, his debut, was at Lords. maybe another seam bowler gets to make a debut at Lords or something. I'm definitely leaning Duffy on that one, but I also they're the two debutants and they're maybe the two least likely players to play at all. Although I think Ajaz Patel might get a whole lot of reps in terms of carrying drinks over the next month. Don't necessarily see a spot for him in these test matches, but I guess you got to have the option. So yeah, I think Duffy is considerably more likely than Ravindra to make a debut, but I wouldn't necessarily bet on either of them.
If Duffy does make his debut, it will be interesting to see how he performs. Because he's going to swing the ball. Well, he'll swing it, but it's a completely different ball. So I'm sure he's been doing lots of work to control and best use the Duke ball. But he needs to have the craft of Tim Southey, I think. Tim Southey bowls at 132 k's an hour on a good day and swings the ball. And sometimes that doesn't look so good. But Tim Southey right now can move the ball both ways, and throughout his whole career he has been able to swing the ball naturally. Him and Trent Boult could pretty much wake up on any day with any ball and swing it. That's just how their rhythm is, how their delivery set up and the angle they run in at. All that natural stuff just correlates to good swing bowling. Jacob Duffy, I just don't know if he's got the skill and the accuracy, and he's been a consistent performer in New Zealand. Playing against, I'll be a lot more confident if it was in New Zealand, because you look at how the likes of Daryl Mitchell and the batsmen, like Will Young and Tom Blundell, a lot of their test cricket was in New Zealand, where they dominated at domestic level. So it's the level of opposition's much higher. Tom Blundell did in Australia. He's a shit part of that example, but the opposition's higher, and then you're just playing on the same pitches in the same conditions that you've been scoring runs and taking wickets, and that's conducive to success at Test cricket. Jacob Duffy, and to some extent Rachin Ravindra, if he does play, they're being put in extremely adverse situations for debuts, and those who have debuted in New Zealand have looked like some of the best cricketers to ever walk the planet. And now they're going to face a different challenge in England. But comparing how Duffy and Ravindra might make their debuts to how some of the other dudes have made their debuts, it's going to take a bit of nuance, because it's a far different challenge for them making their debuts in England.
Yeah, Colin de Gronholm has played 24 test matches. I picked him because his sort of entering the Blackcaps test team coincides with around when this trend would be possible. This stat would be even more skewed if he had played over the home summer as well, but he hasn't played a test since February 2020. But 24 test matches in his career, and 7 of them were away from home. So that's 2/3 of his test career has been in favourable New Zealand conditions. And what you're saying about Jacob Duffy, it does make a lot of sense to me. I think though, Duffy can try and emulate Southey, Boult, and even maybe just a little hint of Wagner, but we already know those three are going to be the guys, the front line three, Jamieson as well, make it 4 in the Test Championship final. Boult being absent, I'm just thinking more about what you're saying about Jacob Duffy trying to swing the ball. Yeah, but it's Matt Henry, I guess he's up against, isn't it? Matt Henry with a career bowling average in Test matches of 51, I think. Matt Henry, yada yada yada, 51.5 from 13 Test matches, 13 wickets, economy of 3.24, which even that isn't fantastic. He's been a sketchy one. You'd almost say Doug Bracewell is probably the best. It might be the best. Well, not the best, but the most well poised for this particular situation, given he's played a bit of Test cricket before and away from home. But I don't really know if he's been considered for that specific role. But we shall see. We'll see how it goes. It's always fun when the depths get tested, because we get to have these conversations.
Yeah. I'm thinking just generally about Duffy. Just like, regardless of who he's up against in the depth chart, just generally him as an international cricketer. Like, Bracewell just has he's got swing and he's got hit the deck. And it's all very natural, and he can bat. He's an excellent athlete in the field. He's got all these different things that make him a fantastic cricketer. Matt Henry, shit test record as you relayed to us there. His advantage is his phenomenal record in England. So he's got the shit test record, but he's got the runs on the board. As a shit cricket reference here. He has the runs on the board. He's got the runs on the board as a bowler in England. Like, his stuff in county cricket was diabolical. And yeah, you can get into like Division 2, all the little bits and bobs that come together, but like just straight up, his work in England is phenomenal, and it's juxtaposed against a test record which kind of isn't so good. And that's because Henry doesn't bowl overly fast, and he's not a big swinger of the ball. He is his best trait, getting back to some NBA scouting stuff here, his best trait is seam movement and the length he bowls. Like, he's always attacking the stump, so he's always bowling pretty full. And he's going to get seam movement. And then in ODI cricket, I'd say he bowls really well because there's a bit more attacking impetus against those deliveries that are usually on the money, usually get a bit of nibble off the seam. So if you're trying to score runs off those deliveries, much more difficult. Test cricket, you can just sit on him for a lot longer, I reckon. And I think Duffy is more similar to Henry. Who's been the big phenom with the seam bowling? Kyle Jamieson. He's got X Factor. He does something completely different. And it is interesting to compare them within the depth chart, but I just think, like, for also just like trying to think who's going to be the most successful at international cricket, Henry and Duffy feel the least likely of that group because they're kind of just plain Jane Kiwi seamers. And the beautiful thing about Tim Southee and Trent Boult is they are just straight up Kiwi seamers who have risen to be some of the best bowlers of international cricket ever. So that's the beauty of them. And then so it's like, which of these straight up and down Kiwi seamers can actually rise above and be world class? And that's the curious thing when you're thinking about guys like Matt Henry, Lockie Ferguson. He's got X Factor. Jacob Duffy, straight up Kiwi seamer. So it's just, which type of bowler, who's got the mindset, who's got the skill set, like who is going to be the most successful out of that group, or who's just going to be the one who just like rises up out of the pack.
It's kind of crazy that Jacob Duffy is only 26 years old. He's been playing first class cricket pretty consistently since he was a teenager, and I would like to see him play the most of those like options they have to fit in that one game without Trent. It might even be 2 games without Trent Boult. You might be able to give Duffy 1 game, Henry 1 game. Bracewell might even get to play both of them. I don't know. I suspect we're going to have at least 4, maybe even 5 or 6 players within that 20-man group who don't play a test match while they're away on tour, but there's still obviously necessary parts of the squad and the touring group and all this. The Blackcaps don't rotate a lot. The exact opposite of what England does. They just don't rotate a lot. They like to keep things nice and stable. And when they have been asked to, like the last time they played away from home was in Australia, I think. Yeah, that would be right, wouldn't it? The test match cricket anyway. And that was also a time when depth was tested. They had to pick a few extra players that they wouldn't otherwise have necessarily been playing. And for the most part, that did not work out so well. And that's largely the reason. Like the reason a lot of these players have come in and done very well at the start is because they are coming into a very stable unit where they're given a specific role, know how the team is going to play cricket. There's no like expectation or burden of expectation on new players. They know they can come out, just try to be the cricketers that got them to this point. And Kane Williamson is going to score all the runs, and Kyle Jamieson, Neil Wagner, Trent Bolt, Tim Southee, they're going to take all the wickets. Like, sweet as, nothing to worry about here. You just do your thing. And that's not it's, I guess it's a privilege or just a lucky aspect of the team. I don't know, but it's something that very quickly disappears when you have to make 2 or 3 or even 4 changes. So I do think they'll try to win all these test matches. I like, as the number one goal. I don't think we'll see rotation at the expense of that. But yeah, I think there will be some opportunities for some of these like depth guys. And I suspect, when the absence of Trent Bolt, I would like to see Jacob Duffy just because he's the freshest onto the scene. I would like to at least like get a baseline of what to expect from him at test match level. Highly suspect Matt Henry will be the guy, and I was thinking that even before you pointed out how good his record has been playing county stuff. So you take that into account, like, sort of has to be Matt Henry, doesn't it? Even though absolutely shocking test record, and there's only so long you can keep going with someone who, like, he doesn't play a lot of tests, he doesn't play a lot of consistent tests, he tends to get like 1 test when someone's injured, sort of thing. But with the average above 50, like, you can't hang around as the next guy up and keep saying that, oh, well, I just haven't had a run of games yet. Like, at some point you've played enough games to where you should have taken plenty more wickets than this. So it could end up being a pretty important series for Matt Henry, even if he does only play 1 game. At least he does have his very excellent ODI bowling to fall back on one way or another, so he's not like in a Colin Munro situation where he was struggling to hold on to like the last format he was still getting picked in, and then stopped getting picked in that despite actually having some decent 2020 form. But so it goes. It's 9 p.m, isn't it? The starting next Wednesday, so gonna be some late nights. Might be late on the emails starting next week, maybe. I don't know. It's a little bit of the caffeine indulgences will have to rise significantly, I think, because I don't want to miss too much of the series. Is the tricky part.
2 things to finish. So Matt Henry, he might just love the Duke ball, which is beneficial for him, or he at least knows how to bowl with the Duke ball, whereas Jacob Duffy has done pretty much everything he's done with the Kookaburra. So maybe Matt Henry struggles with the Kookaburra in the white clothing, but he's really good with the Duke ball. Maybe that's just the thing. And yeah, Matt Henry's stats, they remind me of Mitchell Santner. Like, you can only say Mitchell Santner looks really good at cricket for so long when he's like averaging over 40 with the ball and below 20 with the bat. His batting looks amazing. His bowling is second coming of Dan Vittori. He should always be picked, but his record isn't like it doesn't match up, and it's always a bit strange. But he's back in now, and he's going to lead the Blackcaps to glory in the World Test Championship final. Big stat here for your wildcard. Clayton Lewis, superstar from the Wellington Phoenix, against Western United. I think we said this on the variety show. He had 3 interceptions, and that was the most of any Wellington Phoenix player. Last night versus Western Sydney, Clayton Lewis, 3 interceptions again. Soterio did have 4, which was more. Shout out to him. But Clayton Lewis, 3 interceptions in 2 games in a row. That's phenomenal. That's amazing. Wellington Phoenix have won 2 games in a row, so clear correlation there between Clayton Lewis interceptions and Wellington Phoenix success. 2-1 win over Western Sydney Wanderers. What did you make of that game, especially as we're preparing for their game back at Eden Park this weekend? I think they're playing MacArthur.
Perth Glory, I believe. MacArthur is the last round.
Perth Glory. And they had a 1-1 draw. MacArthur and Perth Glory had a 1-1 draw, and they're above and below the Wellington Phoenix. So ideally you want Central Coast. Oh my gosh. Central Coast are playing MacArthur this week, so, and they're on the same, yes, tonight, Thursday night. And they're on the same points, so who cares? I was going to say you want them both to lose, but they're playing each other, so a draw, and they'll both get an extra point. Maybe one will win, one will lose. Either way, Wellington Phoenix have won 2 games in a row, and they got to win, or at least get a draw probably against Perth Glory on Sunday afternoon. What have you taken from these 2 games moving into the 3rd game of the week? Wild card. I think Piscopo's probably out injured. So what's going to happen there? And is there anything from those 2 games that you're like, that's going to be a key thing against Perth Glory on Sunday?
Yeah, so the Western Sydney game first, like, this was like crammed in between the Wellington homecoming and then there's the Auckland homecoming on Sunday, 3 games in 8 days, got to go over to Western Sydney. In between those for a midweek game, that's always going to be tough. It's especially going to be tough because there was just no margin for error. They really, really, really needed to win this game. Because for one thing, it more or less knocks Western Sydney out of contention. Pretty much does, really. It keeps the Phoenix in contention. And, like, oh man, like when they played Western United, you sort of felt like the Phoenix were the dominant team throughout. You sort of felt like, just with the occasion, with everything that meant, and the, a couple little nicely synchronized coincidences there with, for example, it being Western United and then Andrew Durante's farewell and a couple things like that. Like Clayton Lewis getting their first goal as well was another one of those. It just felt like the Phoenix's day. It felt like if they did what they were supposed to do, they would get 3 points out of it, and they did. It was relatively comfortable, sweet as. Western Sydney Wanderers game, very much a by whatever means necessary. I was going to say match, because it was, but then also performance, because that also was the case, where scored a couple first half goals from corner kicks, conceded a sloppy one in between, but so it goes. And then second half, like, came out, I think they had 3 chances to, like, 3 good open looks at goal within the first 2 minutes of that half starting, and felt like they might, like, just score one more goal and then run away with it if that's going to be the situation. But they didn't come close to scoring again for the entire rest of the night. They spent basically the last 42 minutes plus injury time of that game defending right on their heels. There was an incredible block from Tim Payne with just a couple minutes to go. Couple very good saves from Ollie Sale, some strong committed defense throughout, and Phoenix were not great in possession. They definitely struggled after Piscopo. Like in that second half, they definitely struggled without Piscopo because he didn't have that outlet. Didn't have De Vea either. That was tough. It was a tough watch. It was a nail-biting finish. It was squeaky bum time, as Sir Alex Ferguson says. Like, it was a difficult game to watch, but they came through and got 3 points, which is, like I said, by any means necessary. That's all that matters. I did notice in the first half as well, like, a couple times, just Clayton Lewis popping up with those interceptions and thinking to myself, man, he's really, like, he's picking up that side of his game as well without even, like, forgotten that you'd mentioned that on the I think the Monday podcast. So, the variety show. I mean, so like, yeah, there we go. It's evidential fact and it's eye test. So passes both sides of the coin there. What that means with that game coming tonight, who are we saying? Central Coast and MacArthur. The Phoenix take care of Western Sydney Wanderers basically out of it, because we also have to finish ahead of Perth, who are 2 points behind, but with a game in hand. But since the Phoenix play Perth, that is in their control. Like, they can just beat Perth and take them out of the mix as well. Meaning they still have to overtake one other team to make the top 6. That one other team is either going to be Central Coast or MacArthur, most likely, because Brisbane won against Melbourne City the other day. And also still have a game in hand and 3 points clear, which is very hard to catch Brisbane from this point. So need to overtake MacArthur or Central Coast, probably need to beat Perth as well. So I think we're in a situation where they do need to win both of their last 2 games. But the fact that MacArthur and Central Coast play each other means someone's going to drop points. If it's MacArthur, or if it's a draw, or if Central Coast wins, then the Phoenix's fate is completely in their hands, because they would because they play MacArthur in the final round of the season. They would just have to win both of their 2 remaining games, and sweet as they're in. If it's Central Coast who loses, we would still need Central Coast to drop another point along the way in their final 2 home games, which are against Newcastle and Western United. So if Central Coast loses to MacArthur, we need them to drop points. We would still need them to drop points against Newcastle or Western, because we don't play them again. We don't control that in the way that we would with MacArthur. So that's the situation there. As to building towards the weekend, I think it's a much more like the fact that they got that win. There will be some tired legs, that's difficult, but also the fact they got the win, they got the 3 points. There is definitely that snowballing momentum, and it's going to be another major, like big crowd for the Phoenix, like big home crowd cheering them on against Perth, who have been up and down lately. They're pretty sketchy, or at least inconsistent. If I check the old form guide with them, they drew with MacArthur. They had wins over Adelaide and Western Sydney. They'd actually won 4 games in a row before that, so I guess they'd come out of that. The Phoenix did beat them 3-1 back in about a month ago, so that was sweet. So, but like it's in New Zealand. It's the Perth having to travel. The Perth weren't actually happy about this. They kicked up a little bit of a fuss about, like, why us? We accept that the Phoenix have had to play all these games away from home. That's not nice for them, but why us? Why do we have to make the travel when we're the furthest team away? Which I think they had a little bit of a point. I don't think it cancels out the fact that the Phoenix have played their whole season away up until this point, so I think maybe you sort of just got to take one for the team there. But tends to be the case where Wellington and Perth play that, like, home field advantage is enormous because of the, like, 6-hour time difference or whatever it is between the two, and all the travel that is involved. I feel a lot more confident about them getting 3 points in that game in the way that I did against Western United than I did for that midweek game against Western Sydney. So I think momentum should carry them nicely. Piscopo will almost certainly be out with that shoulder injury. However, they are expecting Ulysses Davia to be back, which more than makes up for that. And with that, I think you just sort of got to feel the same way against the Western United game. You just sort of got to feel like if the Phoenix go out there, take care of what they do, they will put themselves in a good position to win. Takes a few chances, they'll get those 3 points. They're very much in it coming into the last round. Some of it does depend on how that game tonight goes, and obviously we can't report on that till that's actually happened. But the important thing to know is someone is going to drop points ahead of them. So they're getting the 6 points out of 6 so far in their big week. Like, it's mission accomplished to this point. The finals chances are rising with every subsequent game. If they can make that 9 points out of 9 in their 8-day stretch, then they're in a very, very good place.
So who do you think is going to come in for Piscopo?
Well, I think you just chuck Davia in and probably switch Ball back to the left wing. I have some reservations about that because I think Ball's played way better when he's been on the right, but Davia has to play on the right because you want him cutting in onto his left foot so he can shoot. He takes like double the amount of shots of any other player in this Phoenix squad, so I think it's a relatively straight swap. You've got to do a little bit of mix and match to make that work, but the timing at least is convenient in that they've said all along, like, they ruled Davia out for these last 2 games after he got injured, but always with an eye on him being fit for this game. And it does sound like he's probably they're probably hoping for him to get. If he doesn't, I guess he just if he's only fit enough for the bench, or if he can't play, then I guess Soterio comes in on the left wing, same as he did for Piscopo, like as a sub during the game. I think more or less takes care of itself. Part of me very much wanted to see them try James McGarry as a left winger and just have like dual fullbacks, both overlapping with each other in there with him and Sutton, but might have been a little bit too much to ask for. And yeah, Soterio would be the backup to Davia to come in there if that's the case. Piscopo's a rare player in the team because he can create something out of nothing, which is quite important because there aren't that many other guys. A lot of nice facilitating type players and guys who can work off of others, but that sort of instigator, Piscopo is one of them, De Vea is the other one, basically. And if one is out, at least it's convenient in that the other one is coming back.
Piscopo and De Vea, like based on what I saw from Piscopo and then based on those stats from De Vea, they seem like the most, how about that for a sentence, the most least New Zealand players. Like we produce the Chris Woods, we produce the delicate kind of Ryan Thomas and Sarpreet Singh. We don't necessarily produce the every time I get the ball I'm going bang type of footballer. So we replace Piscopo with De Vea, and I think that works out quite nicely. What the other thing that did catch me against that, especially from that Western United game, was just the ability to, every time you go right with Louis Fenton, you've got an overlap, pretty much. Or you've at least got space in which Louis Fenton can get busy down that right flank, and Western United definitely didn't have that kind of threat. I'm not sure what happened last night with the Wanderers game. Is that something, to me, that felt key to how the Phoenix attack? Because if Louis Fenton is consistently bombing down that right side and posing a threat, it opens up the spaces in the middle. Then you can, Tommy Hemig can just be a bit more one-on-one as opposed to two defenders competing for the ball with him. Ben Wayne's got more space. There's more space for Piscopo / De Vea, those type of characters. And it takes some attention away from Clayton Lewis. Like, just having that width seems important. And I definitely noticed Louis Fenton against Western United. So was that relevant against Western Sydney Wanderers? And is that something you've kind of, when the Phoenix are attacking well, that is an element of their play that is important?
Yeah, it's been something I've been on about a lot of the season, really, because the space is there, especially when De Vea plays, because he drifts infield, he looks to shoot, he looks to get infield, and even against Western Sydney, you still saw elements of this. Like Piscopo's doing the same thing on the right hand side. He's looking to get infield, attack his marker, try to get into shooting situations rather than going around the outside and cutting it back, or more of a traditional like that. The way the Phoenix set up, that's what they want their fullbacks to be doing, to be the guys bombing past. And Fenton gets so much space ahead of him because of that, because of the gravitational pull that De Vea has. Just wish he'd do better with it. Like he's not a good enough crosser, and he's not necessarily confident, or maybe it's just because he knows he's not that fast necessarily to be able to just skin a guy one-on-one. Like if he could do that, if he was a player who could just burn someone 1v1, he's always going to be at least 1v1, if not with more space than that to work into. He would be so effective, but he's just not quite the right player to be able to exploit that, which is frustrating because it does feel like an element of the Phoenix's team which could be their major strength, but is actually just another sort of, sometimes it works nicely, sometimes it doesn't. Like it's just another sort of run-of-the-mill aspect of how they play. Just because they don't quite have the right sort of players to fit the jigsaw puzzle together in that way. Didn't see it basically at all against Western. I mean, it didn't even feel like the Phoenix touched the ball in the second half of the Western Sydney game. They were quite good for a decent sort of half-hour spell after Piscopo went off in the first half, scored both their goals in that time. That was decent, but it wasn't really coming through that way. It was more like set pieces and some decent play in the midfield trying to keep the ball moving, which very quickly tried out. The second half was just, as I say, it felt like they hardly touched the ball. But Western Sydney Wanderers played with a back three and wing backs looking to get forward. And that was something that felt like it could be, if they had gone more down that route, tried to make that more of a focal point for how they were playing. It was definitely part of the game plan, but if they really went all in on that, I think that we could have been in a fair bit of trouble there, because we do have those wingers who like to push in and play sort of as inverted number 10s, and that did leave Fenton and Sutton exposed a fair bit, which was dragging the midfield out. And you did see during the second half, relatively late on, you saw Rufer chucked on for one of the strikers. I forget who. It might have been Ben Wayne or someone. Just for an extra body in midfield, because it was getting stretched. It was hard to maintain possession, but yeah, they sort of neutralized the threat from out wide by how they were playing, but they didn't necessarily take full advantage of it themselves, which is convenient for the Phoenix. I can't remember how Perth set up, but we've played relatively well against them so far this season. I would hope we do see a bit more of that sort of fullback play and getting that width, getting those overlaps, and trying to get good balls into the penalty area, because especially in the games that De Vea has missed, it's been pretty notable. Like they have tried to play a little bit more in a way that suits the other guys in their team, which is where I guess that Ewing theory idea came from that I wrote about the other day, and I think we're pretty sure we talked about it last week as well. So like Tommy Hemed, for example, is not necessarily a guy who's fantastic at playing in transition, which is how one of the ways the Phoenix like to play. But if you put a good ball into the penalty area, he knows how to get his head onto it, and he's pretty strong, pretty good in the air. He's gonna score a fair few goals that way. He scored another one against Western Sydney. He was one of the goal scorers, corner into a good area, and he just, dominated his man and put a powerful header into the back of the net. He can play that way, and that's one good area where the Phoenix can be successful. So I would hope we get a bit more of that fence and bombing forward and just having a bit more confidence in what he does and putting in some better crosses into the mixer. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I expect that will be at least part of how they play, but De Vea coming back opens up many new avenues for creativity. It also does, though, perhaps threaten to close one or two of the ones that they've done nicely with the last couple games.
How are you feeling about this game? I will just bring up some odds. Let's see what other people reckon. Wellington Phoenix $1.91, Perth Glory $3.50. So the Wellington Phoenix are the favourites by a hefty margin as well. Based on, I think there's a bit of a wave happening here, Wildcard. The playoff push is in effect, and it's pushing them onto this wave. It started with getting reinvigorated back home in Wellington. Bit of buzz, bit of hype. You see who you're playing for. You see why you're doing it. It's for the fans. Go back over to Australia, get a really gritty, important win. Then come back to New Zealand and put on another show in front of Auckland Phoenix fans. So it does seem like that is a wave of momentum behind the Wellington Phoenix. How do you see that playing out?
Absolutely agree. And I think that's probably about right with the expectations. Like I'd say Perth are a better team than Western United. I still think the Phoenix at home are relatively comfortable favourites, and you would expect them to get 3 points from a game like this, on an occasion like this, and the form that they're in. Tired legs, sort of, that's a factor, but it's less of a factor towards the end of the season when, as you say, like, what you're playing for, who you're playing for, you got a big crowd, like you got that momentum, you got that wave, you got that snowball effect. It adds up. Last night was the game I was really worried about, the Western Sydney Wanderers one. That was the game where I really felt like if they could win that game, it sets them up beautifully for the last couple. If they failed to do so, it would leave a lot of things beyond their control in order to keep them in that mix. So the fact that they somehow got 3 points there, I think it sets them up beautifully to get 3 points against Perth as well, hopefully. It's definitely a more favourable situation than the last one. So if they could do that one, they can do this one.
Beauty. What are you thinking about writing in the email tomorrow? Today? Yesterday?
I might have to do a little bit of Phoenix on the back of some of this. Particularly since I'll see if I can watch that game tonight. It does make a big difference to the Phoenix's standings, so maybe some reaction to that, or at least like the playoff picture beyond that, or we'll see what else I come up with. But got a couple thoughts in the tank. It just depends what ends up being like full on articles and what ends up being half mini articles within the email.
Cowabunga. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Variety Show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Niche Cage. Stay beautiful. Enjoy the sunshine. It's quite sunny and it's winter. Happy days. Chirp, chirp.